and we are just delighted to have everybody joining us. I'm Catherine Argyropoulos. I am the Associate Director of Advancement at New College, and I'm here to welcome you all to be joining us today. We hope that you're staying well and staying healthy during this time. It's been a challenging time, and we are so grateful that you've taken the time today to join us, to think about your next steps in your career, in your education, and to really get ready for your what will be absolutely stellar careers. We've received a huge response today, which has been wonderful. We had about 45 people register, including current students and young alumni. So we can see that this is we had such a huge response, and that this is really a topic that you all are really interested in learning more about. So just a little bit of housekeeping on Zoom before we get started. Many of you are probably quite familiar with Zoom, but just in case you're not as well, in the right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a little icon that says speaker view, and you might want to click on that to see just the person who's speaking. Feel free to send any questions in the chat function, and you can even just put your name in there if you'd like to pose a question live. Note that this workshop is being recorded. And also note that we'll be on here until 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So I'll start with some quick introductions for Emily and Dr. Gershon. Emily Izsak Gershon graduated from Innis College in 2015. Emily's poetry has been published in Arc Poetry Magazine, The Puritan, House Organ, Cough, The Steel Chisel, The Doris, and the Hart House Review. In 2014, she was selected as PEN Canada's New Voices Award nominee. Her chapbook Stick Up was published in 2015, and her first full-length collection, Whistle Stops, a locomotive serial poem, was published by Signature Editions in April 2017. Emily is also an editor and interview coach. She shares tips and tricks for writing successful medical and professional school applications on her Instagram page at EGMedPrep. Dr. Ariel Gershon, New College 2015, completed medical school at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry in London, Ontario, and is currently a pathology resident at U of T. Before that, he completed the specialist program in pathobiology at U of T. He is interested in teaching, which includes curriculum development projects at the medical school level, as well as one-to-one tutoring students in basic sciences. He is an executive of the London branch of Altitude, a mentoring service aimed at providing opportunities to undergraduate students from underrepresented backgrounds in medicine. Welcome, Emily and Dr. Gershon, and I will hand it over to you. Enjoy, everybody.
Thanks so much for that introduction. I'm just going to set up our screen sharing really quickly. Hold on. I'll let Ariel talk while I do the screen sharing.
There's nothing more to say. Yeah, it's really great to have the opportunity to talk to you guys through Zoom. I know there's a lot of isolation around it. The screen is up, maybe I'll stop talking, but thank you all for coming. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, the turnout's been really great. I'm excited to talk to you all and to have some kind of human interaction during this crazy time. All right, so today we're going to go over the basics of writing application materials, any kind of written application materials for either med school or dental school or grad school or whatever it is that you're hoping to apply to. I know from the responses to the surveys that were sent out that about half of you are hoping to apply to med and about half of you are applying to grad schools. So we're going to try to cover all of that in this session. Many of our examples are going to be med focused just because I have Ariel with me and his background's in medicine, but you can apply the broader lessons from all of these slides and everything we're talking about to basically anything you're applying to. So we're going to talk about the goals of a personal statement, the basic structure of a personal statement, a review of common mistakes that people make when they go about writing application material. Then I have an activity to do with you all, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A after that. I do want to also say pretty quickly that for people applying to med school, most of the schools in Ontario don't actually require a full personal statement. They've broken it up into smaller expanded ABS paragraphs or mini essays, but the principles for an overall personal statement will still apply to those smaller paragraphs. And I'll go into some more detail about smaller paragraphs as we move on.
Okay, so we've had already a wonderful introduction, but I love to talk about myself. So this is actually to give you a little bit more context about where we're coming from and why you should listen to us in terms of like our experience. So this is my kind of educational background. So again, from U of T, I went to Western for medical school, and now I'm back at U of T for residency. This is, in yellow is like the number of applications that were involved. And this is all after undergrad. So like to apply to medical schools, I applied to 8 different medical schools. And in green is like the positive outcome, which is like 1 acceptance at Western. And that seems to me like a lot, and it seemed like a lot at the time. And then when I was done with medical school, you go through a similar process to apply to residency, which is, for me, I applied to 30 residency positions, which is like 30 personal statements, 30 like reference letters that you gather. And the outcome of that was matching back to University of Toronto. And just to get a sense of numbers, there were 6 spots and 45 people applied in that year. And then throughout this time, I've been working with MD Consultants, which is like a private application consultant company. And I've seen around like 50 different applications, mostly for medicine, but also for other professional schools and those sort of things. And so the point of all this is that I've seen a lot of volume, and I think there are things that I've learned, not just in the successful applications, but also in like the drafts before, and like just in the number of applications you see, you start to see patterns that you don't necessarily see if you're just working on the first few on your own. And so most of the things we're talking about come from that wealth of experience. And so when we say that we notice things, it's based off that. This is Emily's.
All right, so Catherine already introduced me. You know, my background's mostly at U of T, my educational background. I did my MA in English and Creative Writing at U of T from 2015 to 2017. I worked as a TA at U of T, where I edited and graded more papers and essays and tests than anyone should have to look at in one lifetime. When I'm not editing personal statements, I work as an editor and a writer for an online content creation company. I've been doing med and professional school application editing for around 5 years. I was a community member interview panelist at Schulich when we were living in London. And this last cycle, I gave out a free interview prep session to anyone who had their med school interview unexpectedly move to an online format because of COVID-19. And because that was a free service, I gave out free prep sessions to around 40 people in the span of 3 weeks, which is a lot of people. So a lot of experience. All right.
So this is kind of the opposite of the last 2 slides. That was like why you should listen to us. This is why you should not listen to us. We're going to talk a lot about general things and like rules and like patterns we've noticed, but the personal statement for any application has to be personal, and the details matter a lot. So something may work for you. Basically, you should pay attention to what works for you. I think these are things that we find that we always have to be working on when people are starting to write out, but that's the first thing. The second thing is that we are just 2 people, even with our experience. We haven't seen every application, and we also don't represent any school's admissions committee. This is an important detail. Like I go to U of T, but I can't say anything about like how they actually do things from the perspective of somebody on the inside. That's like just a different thing. And the other thing that's really, really important to figure out is, so for medical school specifically, but for everything that you're applying for, the school will give you some information on what they want from your application. Usually, like the obvious stuff is like word count and stuff like that, but all that stuff is super important. And if you have any question about like what specifically do I need to put in my application, the gold standard is to check with the school and make sure that you have your instructions set out straight. So like this means like the word count or like answering the question that they're giving you, which sounds simple, but you just have to make sure you're tying this back up. So anytime that something we say doesn't line up with what your school is asking you to do, you need to follow what your school is doing. That's just like from the get-go. This is because we are kind of talking to about half of you who are going to medical school, we're going to be using it as an example for those of you who are applying to professional school. The rules will apply, but this is more of like an outline to see like where we're coming from, and then it will help you understand like some of the terms we're using. So to get into medical school, you have like a good GPA, and then you try to get a good MCAT. And then the next part, once you have those numbers, is to have a written plus interview component. And so I've kind of circled it here. It's like Casper is like a written online component that more and more professional schools are doing as well. You might have to write essays or answer questions, and then the interview itself is like its own kind of thing. And then also preparing your resume. These are all like written things that go with your application. And there's this nice concept that we have in medicine that I wish other professional and like graduate schools had, but they kind of do, is this idea of the CanMeds roles framework. Have people heard about this before? I wonder if there's a way, like raise
You
your
can
hand.
do the hand clamping.
Yeah, if you guys know how to raise your hand on Zoom, there was a way I knew how to do that once. But anyway, is that something?
There.
Okay, I got it
Oh.
clapping from Sally. Very nice. And Stella. Okay. So basically the CanMeds role, for those of you who don't know, it's like a framework that the Royal College of Canada, which governs like all the MD people in Canada and gives them their license and stuff. So it's a big deal. They have like a list of qualities that they think are important to be a doctor or a resident or whatever. This is like every part of medical education. It's there. Like it's there for admissions, it's there for residency, it's there for like when you're a practicing physician. So for example, being a scholar, they think is an important thing. So for that, they explained like, okay, you're gonna like study well or like be able to do research or something. Or being a communicator is like an important part of being a doctor. That's another one of these roles. But the nice thing about this is that you know what qualities you're trying to show. And later we're gonna show how you can come up with your own kind of important qualities. But this is a nice idea. So just imagine that there are qualities that you want to show about yourself when you're applying.
And for the grad students out there, because you're not as lucky as the prospective med students who have this all laid out for you, it's a good idea to take it upon yourself to come up with some of your own like CanGrads roles that you think would be important for someone applying to the position that you want to gain access to. All right, so yes. Okay, so we're going to jump into the written materials now and discuss what a personal statement should accomplish. So really, any written material that you're submitting to a school should accomplish these two things. The first thing is it should set you apart from other candidates. Nobody should be able to write this essay but you. And later on in the presentation, I'm going to tell you how you can set yourself apart in your personal statement. It should also prove using concrete examples, that means stuff from your CV or your ABS if you're a prospective med student, why you would be suited for the role that you're applying to. I need to know why you would be a good doctor, a good medical student, a good grad student, dentist, dental student, whatever it is you're applying to. Okay, so now I have an obligatory Instaplug, which means that when I was offering all these free interview prep sessions this past year, I was reading a bunch of personal statements and listening to a bunch of interviews all at once, all in one day, back to back. Sometimes I had like 5 students back to back. And I noticed that I was repeating the same tips, sometimes 5 times a day to 5 different people. So what I decided to do was compile the most common tips and corrections and edits that I was giving people and put them all in one place so it would be accessible to everyone on this Instagram page. We're going to go through some of them today. I picked just the most general tips, the ones that will be applicable to the most people, also the ones that I think are the most important. I have these all written out in full on the page, so if you want to go check that out after, you can go look at it and have it all written out in full. And there are also more tips there than we're going to talk about today. So if you're looking for more information, that's a good place to go. So starting with the first one, which I also think is the most important, if you take nothing else away from this whole presentation, this is the thing to remember. And that is your personal statement is not a biography, it's an argumentative essay. That means that your personal statement has a thesis, and that thesis is, I deserve a spot at this school, I belong at this school, I will be a good medical student, a good doctor, a good grad student, you want me here. Everything you write in your personal statement should be in service of proving that thesis. If a sentence does not prove that thesis, it's not worth the word count. It doesn't belong in there. Some people like to think of a personal statement as a biography. So they start off talking about where they were born and what they did in high school and then undergrad and then where they are now. I don't really care what you did before now. I care about who you are today. And if some things in your past have informed who you are today and therefore prove that you will be a good doctor, grad student, whatever it is, then it's fair to keep it in. But if it's not proving that thesis statement, then it doesn't belong in your personal statement. So this one is more for the prospective med students out there, although I have to say I have seen some prospective grad students do this on occasion, which is kind of interesting. But a lot of people think that they're being very personal and revealing and interesting when they open their personal statement with a story about a family member's medical condition. The problem with doing that is that everyone thinks that's a good idea. And I've read 10 personal statements back to back that all start with, my mom had cancer and I had to be by her bedside and it was a tough time for us. And then we got through it and that's how I know I want to be a doctor. There are a few problems with this. The first problem is it doesn't tell me much about who you are. It just tells me that you went through something difficult and that you may have learned from it. But I don't know what you learned from it and I don't know much about your skills or abilities or qualities. The other problem is that it's a common thing that everyone does, so it's not going to set you apart even though you think it's setting you apart. And it also isn't a good illustration of your thesis statement. It doesn't serve to prove your thesis of why you would be a good doctor, a good medical student. Something else I like to tell my students about this is that almost everyone in the world has gone through some experience with the hospital system. Everyone has been to a hospital, they've had a family member who was sick, but not everyone wants to be a doctor, and more importantly, not everyone would be a good doctor. I personally have been to a hospital, I've had family members who've been in a hospital. I don't want to be a doctor, I wouldn't be a good doctor. What separates me from you? What makes me different that I wouldn't be a good doctor and makes you go through that same experience and come out of that thinking, yes, I want to do medicine? If you're going to tell me a story like that, you must include that part of it because that tells me who you are today, what your skills are, what you've learned from it, why you'd be a good doctor. Okay, so now that you know what not to do in an intro paragraph, we can talk a little bit about what you should do in that first paragraph. You're going to want to give me a bit about your educational background. So what school you're going to now, what you're studying. I need a statement of intent. So what you plan to do, why you're writing this personal statement in the first place. I want to apply to a master's in mathematics at U of T, whatever it is. This shouldn't take you more than a couple sentences, 2-3 sentences max to give me your educational background and a statement of intent. And then after that, I want a summary of the qualities, skills, and or abilities that you're going to talk about in the essay. If you're applying to med, usually these are going to be CanMed skills. They don't have to be CanMed skills. That's a good place to start. If you're applying to grad school or something else, you're going to want to come up with your own qualities, skills, and abilities that you think are transferable to whatever it is that you're applying to. So something that you possess, that's a strength of yours that you're going to carry forward into whatever program you want to enter into. After you're done your intro paragraph, you're going to move into the body paragraphs. And for those of you who are applying to med and are doing those shorter ABS paragraphs instead of essays, you're basically only writing body paragraphs. So everything I say about the body paragraphs, just imagine that I'm talking about those expanded ABS essays for like Western and U of T. Make sure in your entire essay, but also in the body paragraphs, you're not just talking about why you want that spot, but also why the school should want you. So a metaphor that I like to explain to my students is that imagine that you are the director of some kind of musical performance. You're producing it and you're looking to hire a singer to come in and be the lead of your performance. The catch is that you are deaf, so you can't hear the person sing. So you are just getting these written applications and you have to read them and decide who you're going to hire. The first person writes you a letter and they say, I fell in love with singing when I was 5 years old. I heard Celine Dion perform at the Grammys and I saw how enamored everybody was with her performance. And I thought, that's what I want to do with my life. I want to be able to lift people's spirits with my voice and talent. And I just really want to be a part of your company. And that sounds pretty good. And you're thinking, okay, maybe I'll hire that person. But then you read another essay that says, I'm writing to you because I would love the opportunity to star in your production. I'm very dedicated to my craft and I have a proven track record of performances where I was the lead and I sang and people enjoyed it, and it was a successful performance. I auditioned for the role of Annie at my university's production. I was up against 24 other very talented women, and I was ultimately cast to be in the role. I practiced 5 days a week. I took my job very seriously, and we sold out that opening night, and I got a standing ovation for the first time in my university's history. A campus production had never got a standing ovation before. Later on, in my 4th year of university, I took part in an international singing competition, and I ended up placing 3rd out of 150 candidates. Who's the person you're going to hire for that position? If you can't hear the person sing, you need evidence that they actually are a good singer, because otherwise you might know that they love singing, but you don't know that they're going to be any good. So if someone tells you, here are a bunch of other people who have heard me sing and thought I was good, I can then trust that it's okay to put you in my production and that you're not going to be a horrible singer because you placed 3rd in this competition and you got a standing ovation. And when you're applying to professional schools and med schools or whatever else you're applying to, you can't exactly audition for the role of doctor because that would be unethical. We don't have patients who want to pretend to be your patients while you audition for the role of doctor. And also, it's just a hard thing to do. You don't have any experience being a doctor. You have to prove to your audience that you have transferable skills that would make you a good physician down the road. And you prove that using your quantifiable experiences and a track record of proven successes.
Mm-hmm. And like, this is a question that we got quite often in the submitted questions. Like, how do you apply for a position where you might not have the most experience? I mean, in medical school, it's like it's the nicest example. Like, they don't expect you to have the experience that you were a doctor before you apply to medical school. And it's the same thing for graduate school. Like, you can't show them that you were a good graduate student before you applied to graduate school. So it's kind of built into it, and it's a very common, like, we got the question a couple of times, and it's also a very common question, like, how do I show them this thing in the future? The way to do it is to break it down into those qualities and then prove those individual qualities. So I like what you said about transferable skills. You should think of it that way. Like, you're proving something about yourself in a different capacity and you're applying it to the future. And then you're arguing it. Like, it's an argument that, like, I will be good at it. So.
All right. So when you're writing your body paragraphs, or for prospective med students, when you're writing those expanded ABS entries, it's a good idea to use the STAR method. I don't know how many of you have heard of the STAR method, but I'm just going to explain it so that everyone's on the same page. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. And it's basically a tool to help you tell a story. So what you're going to want to do is talk about the situation in which you found yourself or you had to do something. This is like, in my 3rd year of university, I worked as a math tutor. That's the situation. Task is the thing you specifically had to do in this story. So I had a student who was having difficulty understanding long division, and I had to help him understand that for an upcoming test. Action is what you did in order to accomplish your task. So I set up a study schedule for him. I used different tools to help him learn long division. I showed him some videos on YouTube. I made a diagram for him, whatever you did to accomplish that task. And the result is what happened at the end. How were you able to accomplish this task? He really liked the lessons. At the end, he was able to score 90% on his test. Quantifiable results are better than non-quantifiable results, but if you don't have one, if it's just qualitative, that's fine too. In terms of the breakdown of the STAR method and how many words to assign to each part of it, the action component should be the biggest part. The bulk of the story is how you went about accomplishing that task. This is like a very specific breakdown with very specific numbers. It doesn't need to be this specific. If you're like 20% on situation and like 16 on task, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. The idea here is that the action is the biggest part and everything else is smaller relative to action. The other important thing is to include a lot of details in your STAR method stories, especially in that action portion. So when I say action is the bulk of it, I mean that is going to be full of details. The more details, the better. When a lot of people were asking, how do I set myself apart from other candidates? This is where you set yourself apart. You do it with details. Somebody else may have been a math tutor, but nobody else used this kid's eraser collection to diagram out how to divide 6 by 3 or knew that he really liked cars, so used cars to illustrate how division worked. The more details you have in your story, the more different it's going to be from anyone else's story. And also it just illustrates to the person reading your story that you are a believable human being who actually did this thing. You're expanding this activity beyond just a line on your CV.
Yeah, and you would be surprised like how far details go. Like there are times where I've read a bunch of applications in the same day, and there are some details that just stick out to me that you just remember. And like part of having a nice application, like when you know you're in a good place, is that they remember you for good reasons. Like I remember which applicant like had a special nickname for like a method that he used to like fix problems, or like she had a special notebook, one of our students who like would like write some problems down on her special notebook, or magic notebook, that's what she called it. But like those things are like years and years old for me that I read that, but it's just like details that make the application come to life. And it's especially important if you haven't done an interview, or if there is no interview stage, to try to stand out in those ways. So details really do help a lot.
In creative writing, we call this show, don't tell.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me that you are a communicator or a leader. Show me using examples that you have those qualities. After you're done your STAR method paragraph or portion of your paragraph, connect that quality that you're discussing in the paragraph back to medicine, or if you're a grad student, back to your grad program, basically back to your thesis, which is I'm going to be a good doctor, I'm going to be a good grad student. So with our example with the kid who was having trouble with long division, you might want to say that it's really important for doctors to be good communicators. They're constantly teaching their patients about their diagnoses and different treatment plans, and you need to be able to teach patients in that way. Therefore, your teaching skills are transferable to a career in medicine. You could also say that as a doctor, you have to teach residents and junior doctors and medical students, and your teaching skills are transferable in that way. Basically, tell me the so what. Why are you proving to me that you have these teaching skills? And the so what is because the teaching skills will serve me in my future career. All right, so this is my level up chart. If you're writing a personal statement or a mini essay or any kind of written material, and you just list your activities as you would on a CV, that's level 1. You don't want to be at level 1. Level 2 is if you use the STAR method to tell a full and detailed story about the activity. That's great, but not the best. Level 3 is you use the STAR method to tell a full and detailed story, and you connect the transferable skills you illustrated to your desired position/career. Fantastic. Level 4 is you do all those things, and you also connect the skill to your specific school or the program you're applying to. Now, if you're doing those mini essays for U of T or Western for medicine, you don't have to do this in every single mini essay if it's a stretch for you. Like if you don't have a super strong connection, plus those are only 250 words, you may not have room for it. But if you're doing a full personal statement, especially for grad school, make sure that you're connecting your qualities to the school as well and what they might be looking for, to find out what schools are looking for and what kind of programs might jive well with your personality and your experiences. Start with Google, but also talk to students who are currently in those programs. They have insider information that you definitely want to know about. You're going to seem more impressive to the admissions committee if you have that kind of information about what goes on at the school. Anything to add about that?
Sometimes it's official knowledge. Like on the website, they'll say, we're looking for this. So if it's there, it's amazing. So just look for it if it's there.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a chart that I give out to students around interview time to help them like organize their stories in a STAR method kind of fashion, but it also works for outlining your personal statements. If you guys want this Google Doc, you can message me after. I have my contact information up there somewhere, and I will send this to you. Basically, it's just a way for you to outline the activity that you want to talk about, the quality it illustrates, situation, task, action, result, and then connecting it to your future profession. So this serves as an outline for any of your body paragraphs or any of those shorter APS essays. Okay, so because I'm an English specialist, I'm going to jump into grammar and style. I know a lot of people had questions about this in those initial surveys. It might get a little dry. Bear with me, we're talking about grammar. Okay. So the first grammar tip to keep in mind is to avoid weak language in your personal statements, AKA might isn't mighty. Words like might, could, this might help me as a future physician. I could use this in my career. Don't use it. All you have to do is take it out. Just if you see it there, lift it out, remove it. Your sentence is fine without it.
Yeah. This is actually like a big thing where people are not used to talking about themselves in a very positive way, I think. And especially when it comes to the application, they actually want you to do that. So it's something that people are just like walking around their day-to-day. You might say that like, this is sometimes okay, but you want to be more strong in like an interview situation or an application situation, just as strong as possible.
The other tip I have is to use active rather than passive language in your written application. So, grammar lesson. An active phrase or sentence is when the subject, the thing or person doing the action, comes before the action in the sentence. So the boy threw the ball, the boy is the subject, threw is the verb, boy comes before threw, that is an active sentence. The reverse of that would be passive, where the verb comes first and the subject comes after. So the ball was thrown by the boy. Usually passive sentences have a like was thrown, was picked up, was dodged, whatever in front of it, some kind of smaller word in front of it. This kind of passive language is used a lot in like lab write-ups when you're talking about scientific experiments that you did. So like the beaker was filled, whatever it is. The reason it's used in lab write-ups is because you don't want to emphasize yourself as the person doing the experiment. You want to emphasize the experiment. That's what's important. When you're writing a personal statement, you want to emphasize yourself. That's why active language is better. It puts you in the position of an active participant in any activities that you're talking about. The event was organized by me and my team. Doesn't sound as strong as I organized the event along with my team. It's also a clearer, less roundabout way of saying I organized the event.
Yeah, and this is like, actually, it seems like it could be subtle, but it makes a big difference. There was an example, this is the example here about was organized. We had a student who was like saying how there was this event that just happened, and that was like two words of a sentence that like, oh, this event like occurred. And it was like in very passive language. And so because of that, we just didn't pick up on it. We didn't talk about it more. But then when I later asked the student about this event that happened, they said, oh, I organized this and like I did this. And like when you put yourself in a more active thing, it opens you up to write more about yourself or to think more about like what you did about it. And really that's what they want to find out from you from the application. They want to know like, what are the things that you've done and like what kind of person you're going to be. So another way of thinking about this grammar thing, which should help you when you're actually writing, but also when you're thinking about what you're showing them, is that like, I'm talking about myself now. Like I'm the subject and like this sentence is going to be about me doing something. So it's a subtle thing, but I think it makes a big difference.
The next tip I have is clear is better than ornate, kill your darlings. Kill your darlings is also a creative writing saying that we writers like to throw around. It just means that the lines that you like the best in a piece of writing are often the lines that you have to cut. They're the lines that are the most flowery, the most fun, but they don't serve your thesis or they're a little too ornate. When it comes to writing application materials and really most things, good writing is just clear writing. It means you have short sentences that are easy to follow. You have a simple essay structure that's easy to follow. The easier to follow it is, the better it is. Okay, and this one was actually a few people in the survey before this workshop asked how to strike the right balance between a personal voice and a professional voice. Basically, you want to write your personal statement as if you're talking to a patient, for the prospective med students out there, for the grad students, as if you're talking to a student. Don't say anything in your personal statement that would compromise that professional relationship that you would have either with a patient or a student. You want to be personal, you want to make a connection with the person you're talking to, just like you would want to make a connection with a patient, but you also don't want to reveal anything too personal or talk too colloquially because you want to keep the professional air about the whole situation. All right, so now we're going to do an activity that's going to be a bit interactive. So I guess if I ask a question, we can have people chime in and actually talk, or maybe just type in the chat. We'll see. But basically, we have a sample paragraph here. This candidate is applying to med school, and this paragraph is an expanded ABS essay for Western, or if you're not familiar with ABS and med stuff, you can think of it as a body paragraph in a larger personal statement. So we already have the intro paragraph, and this is the next paragraph in which this person is talking about an activity that they did. There's a 250 word limit on this paragraph. So I'm going to read it out loud. I'll put it up on the screen. And then after, we are going to talk about it. Let me just move this.
We can do it here.
Oh, right. So the paragraph says, music is a huge passion of mine. I've been playing piano since I was 6 years old. My mother is a concert pianist, and I grew up listening to her play beautiful music in our home. When she immigrated to Canada from Hungary, she couldn't speak any English. She connected to other people through music. When I was younger, I also wanted to be able to connect to people in that way, so I started teaching myself to read sheet music and play by ear. I started teaching piano lessons 3 years ago. Most of my students are under the age of 12, although I have a few older students. I really enjoy being able to pass my love of music on to the next generation. It's very fulfilling to be able to watch my students grasp a new concept or learn how to play a new song. Last summer, we organized a concert for my students. We invited all their friends and family to the event, which was held at our local community center. My students loved being able to share what they had learned in our lessons with their loved ones. Overall, the event was a success, even though it rained that day and we had to move all of our equipment inside at the last minute. I'm excited to organize another concert event for my students in the future. So I'm going to open this up to you. What do you know about this applicant from reading this paragraph? You put a clapping thing if you want to talk, but then.
I think they can just unmute themselves.
Oops. That make this bigger.
I think you have to. I don't know. I think that is the biggest it goes. But so the question is like, what do you know about this applicant? Another thing is like, what do you notice about this? What does this make you feel? What does it make you think? Just
Or
like in general.
what is this paragraph doing successfully and what is it doing
Yeah.
unsuccessfully?
Oh, I think, are we able to see the chat?
Uh-huh.
Oh, there we go.
All right.
Oh, okay, cool.
All right, so we have, we know about their mom, that's correct. She teaches piano, self-taught, passionate about music, that they love music, but know how good of a teacher they are. All right, so all good suggestions. You can also, I like this chat function. Maybe we'll just do this. If you also want to write in the chat, what suggestions would you have for this applicant if you were editing this paragraph? Someone said for the action, maybe more details in how the planning was done or how she taught the kids, how the lesson plans are made. That's an excellent suggestion. I 100% agree with that. I would, if I was editing this personal statement, I would definitely say, do exactly that.
Does anybody want to say like, what is this person applying for? Like if you just had this text, what would you think they were applying for?
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you can hear me, actually, if this is an application, it's not clear what kind of program they're applying for.
Yeah.
And I know it's music, but a lot of these qualities I think could apply to a whole bunch of different programs. And I think that makes it confusing for a school if they're looking at this person to be part of that school.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I see like some comments coming in like music education. Like, is this person applying to a music education program? Actually, this is for medical school application. So like, you can see how it's probably building, like if we think about like, what's the argument and like, what's the thing that this person's thesis is, this person is arguing pretty well, maybe that they're going to be good at musical education, but it's not the right argument for the application. The application should be, how are you going to be a good medical student? Or if this was for, research, how would you be a good graduate student? So like, I think it's really awesome that you made that connection, because like, it's, even though I think it looks nice, like I enjoyed reading this, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And that's actually a major weakness in this thing. Any other questions about this one? Like, are there things that people liked about this specifically? There's a way, I guess, you guys to point to the text. I don't know if you've done this in Zoom before. It should be in the top.
Or maybe I just can't, I don't know. Something I wanted to point out here is the word we.
Mhm.
So this is something that I find a lot of female applicants do actually, where they are taught to like minimize their own experiences in order to appear more humble and ladylike. Male students do this too, but women do it more often, where they write like we organized when really I organized or you organized. And it's fine to say we. If you did something truly in collaboration with other people, it's fine to give credit where credit is due. You can say, we organized a concert event. It was my job to promote the event on Facebook and make sure that each student knew what they were supposed to play. So if you're going to put a we statement in there, make sure you follow it up with an I statement so I know what your specific role was. But to just say we and not have an I in there, I don't know who the we is. I don't know who's involved or what this person specifically did.
Yeah. I even like just never saying we and just saying I did this with other people. And like, again, like the we is like how many people? Is it like we, like you and a committee of 30 students did it, or we is like you and one other person and they didn't do that much? So actually pretty important.
The other thing I wanted to highlight here is about her mom immigrating from Hungary to Canada, which if we're asking the question, does this prove the thesis that this person is a good medical applicant, would be a good doctor, a good med student? It doesn't, because it's not about her, it's about her mother. I would take that out. And then we have more room in this paragraph to talk about what she actually did to teach these students and what her skills are.
Yeah, and actually this is like, it comes up very often where people ask about like the length, like 250 words is not very much. How do I get everything in there? And then there's usually different reasons why people go over, but very often people like to include these personal things like that don't necessarily build the argument. It's the same kind of problem as when you say that somebody who's close to you was sick and then you observed it. It's people find it very personally like important to them, and that's why they put it in. But like you should think about, does this make the argument go forward at all? So like, I think even one of the first comments we got in the chat was like, we learned about this person's mom, which is nice. And probably this person thinks it's important to like know where their mom is from, but why is it important is an answer. Like you should answer that question. And then we can be on the same page about the sentence.
The other thing about this paragraph is that there are really two different activities in here. We have someone who teaches piano and also a concert that's being organized. Each of those things could be their own paragraph, and there's room like in this one paragraph to fully flesh out one of those things. There isn't really room for both of those things within 250 words. If this was a larger personal statement and there was another paragraph to come after and you had more room, you could do a whole paragraph just on teaching and then a whole paragraph on organizing a concert and talk about how those different skills are transferable to medicine. But it's not a great idea to jam two different things that require two different sets of skills and abilities and two different STAR method stories into one 250-word paragraph. And then also, there's no connection to medicine at the end here. There should be a connection to the thing you're applying to.
Yeah, and again, like we were just talking about, like, it doesn't seem like it fits medicine, it fits like medical education. It's because the last sentence is about organizing a concert in the future. So like that's the thing that you are leaving the applicant, or like the person reading your application, that's like the last thing on their mind. So that's what they think is one of the more important things for you. So just like, that's like one other way you could signal what is important.
Someone asked, should each body paragraph talk about a different skill? Usually, yes. That's a good way to start. It's a good framework to go about talking about these things. I know for those U of T paragraphs, they sometimes ask you to jumble like 3 different skills into one paragraph. If they ask for that, absolutely do it. Sometimes skills are kind of close together. So like communicator and teacher are skills that go together that you can talk about at the same time and use the same example to talk about. You can put those 2 things in the same paragraph. But generally, it's good practice to put 1 quality per paragraph, sometimes 2 if they're closely related. Any other questions about this sample paragraph before we move on? You can just put it in the chat. No. All right, so next I'm going to show you what this paragraph would look like after we applied all of our suggested edits that we came up with together. I'm just going to clear that. Oops. All Okay, so I'm going to read this one out loud, and then after that, we can talk about what is more successful about this paragraph. I've been teaching piano to children and adults for the past 3 years. Through this experience, I have learned how to adapt my tone of voice, teaching techniques, and language to suit students of different educational backgrounds, ages, and abilities. When working with young children, I often teach them playful mnemonics and engaging music-based games. One of my young students was having difficulty understanding rhythm, so I showed her how to count beats using one of my favorite childhood hand clapping games. After we played the game a few times, she was able to understand musical rhythm and play Mary Had a Little Lamb flawlessly. When she came back for her lesson the next week, she told me that she liked the clapping game so much that she taught it to her younger brother. An adult student of mine was feeling anxious about playing in front of large crowds, so I taught him a breathing technique to help calm his nerves. I told him about my own struggles with playing in front of large audiences and directed him to some smaller venues where he could play in front of smaller crowds to help him boost his confidence. He thanked me for my advice after he effortlessly played a cover of Hallelujah at his brother's wedding. As a doctor, I will be tasked with teaching patients about their diagnoses and treatment plans, and I will have to adapt my tone of voice and teaching techniques to suit their individual needs. The way I explain a cancer diagnosis to a 6-year-old will be quite different from the methods I use to teach an elderly patient how to incorporate more exercise into his daily routine. I'm excited to bring the teaching and communication skills that I've learned from my work as a piano teacher into my career as a physician. So in the chat, or if you want to speak up, can you just tell me what you know about this person and what you think this personal statement or this paragraph is doing well or what it's not doing as well?
I like that for the examples he or she gave about teaching her students, it kind of included something physical, like she was teaching breathing techniques or she was teaching hand clapping. And I find that when I think medical school, like that's interesting to me. That kind of stands out. It's not just I taught her how to read sheet music or something like that. So I thought that was a strong example.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And the skills she's talking about here are transferable to medicine. So when you're thinking about like which things from your CV or your resume that you're going to include in your personal statement, include the things that are most transferable to whatever it is you're applying to. When you think about teaching piano lessons, you may not immediately think that that is something that a good doctor might want to talk about in their personal statement. But if you can prove that the skills you learned from that experience are applicable to medicine, then it's fair game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, that was like another big question that we got was like, if I have all this retail experience, for example, how am I going to apply to a graduate student program? That's part of it. It's like you're going to build an argument, you're going to like find the skill, and then you're going to try to convince the person reading it that it actually was important for you as a future, full-time researcher or something like that. I like in the chat that people have mentioned there is a main skill here that's obvious from reading it, and they highlighted being able to adapt in different circumstances. I think like there's a bunch of skills that we can pull out here, not just that one, but I agree, like the skill that is transferable here, it pops out at you. So then you can imagine, which is the next step, like how are they going to be as a doctor or as a medical student? And again, like huge difference. We know what this person is applying for, which is actually like a thing that people don't always think about when they're writing their first draft of their resume. But I think you can see now that it makes a difference, like a huge difference in how the person was writing about their own experience.
Something about this paragraph is that there are actually 2 STAR method stories in here. We have the first instance with the younger student and then the older student. If you have room for 2 and you want to talk about 2, you can talk about 2. This one is about being able to adapt, so it makes sense to include more than one, so you can show that you've adapted to multiple situations. You might find that in a paragraph you only really have room for 1, or the skill you're talking about only lends itself to one particular STAR method story. That's totally fine. This is within the 250 word limit, but if you only wanted to include 1 STAR method story, you could also talk about at the end how doctors need to teach residents and medical students and transfer it that way. You could also talk about the specific school you're applying to and say that I know at Western medical students have to teach junior students and they're responsible for leading group discussions and doing small groups. And my skills that I learned from teaching piano will be useful to me as I lead small groups at Western University. That would be even stronger. Mm-hmm. Someone wrote, does writing as a physician versus as a future physician make a significant difference? No. Whatever you have room for. I think they're both fine.
Yeah, it's just about clarity. Sometimes it's more clear to write, in the future, I will do this. So as long as the rest of the sentence says, as a physician, I will later do this. Like, I think clarity is important.
And then we have, is it more effective than to use experiences that are not directly related to healthcare and drawing a connection to a career in medicine versus giving an example of your experience with healthcare? They are both good and they are both equally valuable. You should do both.
Yeah, I would encourage you to think about the qualities. Like, they're both important. I actually find that most people, if they're going to make a mistake here, they're going to think that the hospital stuff is like way more interesting because it's more interesting to them because like they don't have the experience and that they want to be doctors. So like they feel like, okay, when I went to the hospital, that's like the most important thing that I can talk about on my resume. But it's actually most of the time not. And usually the reason is you're not really put in a situation as an undergraduate student where you're volunteering in a hospital that's like super important. That's like a very rude way of saying it, but like you might have more responsibilities in a different role, and you might be bringing up your volunteering in a hospital, but something that inspires you or something that is like important to you. But if you think about like, why will I be a good physician? You can find stories outside of medicine. I think you should just like be broad about how you're thinking about it initially, and then you can choose the best stories. That's always like the best situation to be in. Like you prepare for everything, and then when you end up writing it, you can just choose whatever's strongest.
How you write about your experiences is more important than the experience itself. So a very well written paragraph about being a piano teacher is more valuable than a poorly written paragraph or one that's not detailed enough about working in a hospital. But if they're both equally fully fleshed out and they're both good, then they're both equally valuable. You probably want to include some medical experiences in your overall application. So if you are writing 10 different paragraphs for Calgary, for instance, it would be nice if you could cover multiple different qualities and have some in there that are med related. But if two are med related and the rest aren't, totally fine. Okay, so
we're naturally going into like Q&A, which is fine. And it's great. We wanted to have time to answer some questions. So I guess we can open it up to anything that came up in the talk that you had questions about. We also wrote down some of the ones that were sent in that we could address as well. So we're going to give you a chance to either type it up or if you want to just talk. But in the meanwhile, we can talk about some of these that didn't come up already.
Someone asked, I don't know what slide it's on. We'll just leave it here.
We're on Zoom. There we go.
Let's leave it here and look here. Someone asked about where's a good place to get people to look over your essays. We thought this was a super important and good question. The short answer is as many people as you can to get to look over your essay, get them to look over it, friends, parents, anyone. New College has a writing center that will look at your applications one time in the school year for professional schools or grad schools or whatever it is you're applying to. So definitely take advantage of that. U of T also has a career center where you can go to get someone to look over your essay and your personal statements. This is a service that I do charge for it. You can find that information on my website via my Instagram. But basically, like even if you're paying someone to look over your essays, as many people as you can get to look at it as possible, that's great.
Yeah, and somebody asked, I think early on in the chat, like, did I use a consulting agency? Like, I did basically what we just said about using all those services. So there's a New College Writing Center, but there's also like a U of T, I think, Career Center where they'll also see things. And I also spoke with friends and like the MD consultants, which I work for now, did like an event. So they're a prep company, but they did an event through U of T Career Services where they did something similar to this, which is kind of why we're interested in it. Like there's basically lots of different opportunities out there to show people your resume. And I think time is on your side in that, like, the more time you put into it, the better your written part can be. But it's kind of like an endless thing. Like it's something that you'll never get like 100% perfect, but it's one of those things where you can make a lot of gains. So it's like definitely like a good part to like pay attention to in your application.
Any other questions? You can just unmute yourself or write in the chat. Oh, regarding the word limit required by schools, do you suggest we use it all up or use as much as needed to get a point across? Generally, you want to use it all. They give you that word limit because the schools think that that's the amount that you need to be able to express yourself fully and get your point across fully. You basically want to use it all. Most of the time I find that it's not enough and that most people go over it and then need help cutting, which ultimately makes your essay better because it's more succinct. Not a big deal if you have to cut, but yeah, definitely use the full word limit.
Yeah. And Nancy says, is it more or less effective if all the short essays are related? So
No.
I think, okay, so maybe yes and no. So the way you've asked the question, it's like, for example, if somebody's passionate in music, should we have a theme of music experiences? I think like that's the wrong, so it's good to have a theme, but the theme should be a quality that the school cares about. It's right to talk about music experiences as your theme if you're applying to like music education program, but if you're applying to like graduate school, think about like what your activity in music shows about you. So like in the last case we had, it was like me being good at music actually shows you that I'm good at being a teacher and I want to be a teacher as a doctor. Like that kind of process helps you get there. It's actually nice for you to have like a brand, like you are like selling yourself as a person who is good at teaching and is like empathic and whatever. Like those are the qualities that I have. And then all the stories I choose from my work experience and my volunteer experience prove those things. It's nice to like think that way. But it should be more about the qualities. I think that's the most important part of the answer to your question.
When U of T and Western ask you to do those little essays, they actually assign certain qualities to each of the paragraphs. U of T does it in clusters, Western does it by individual activities. So they're going to ask you to talk about a different quality in each of the paragraphs. Mm-hmm. It's better if you can show that you have varied experiences. So maybe one on music, one on your athletic activity, one on academic activity, research, whatever. Variety is good. You are the common thread in your application. So no, they don't need to all be about music. If one was about music, you can show variety. Mm-hmm. What are the other questions? How should we talk about weaknesses in our application? Okay, so the short answer is don't talk about weaknesses in your application unless you're explicitly asked to talk about weaknesses in your application. If sometimes schools will let you like write a short paragraph explaining any discrepancies or strange things that came up in your education that led to a semester that wasn't as great as your other ones, or if like there's a big jump, they give you a little bit of space to explain that. How do you go about explaining that? I would, what?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
How do you go about explaining that? I would say, make sure that if you're going to justify a reason why your grades aren't as good, that it's an actual justification. I had someone once say that like they didn't do as well because they didn't try as hard. And if you're going to do that, just don't write anything. Like it's better just to leave it. If you have like an actual reason, like there was a family emergency or something actually happened, you can write about that. Just make sure you're not excusing the bad marks or whatever it is, and that you're committed to doing better in the future, and you actually show that you have done better since that year that you didn't do as well. So you could say like, in my third year, there was an instance in my family, we moved to a new house and my mom was really sick and I had to work a part-time job, so I didn't have enough time to work on my schooling as much as I'd like. But I still made a schedule for myself and made like, tell me everything you did do to make your goals happen, and then tell me what you're now doing in the future to make it better. So focus on what you're doing to remedy those weaknesses instead of just the weaknesses themselves, but only if you're explicitly asked and only if you absolutely need to.
Yeah, I think it's better to showcase your strength. That's like the short on it. Like if you have space to write about your strengths, you should put it there. I'm just mindful of the time. I think we were only booked until 6. We're glad to stay a little bit later, but just to mention, like on the Instagram, I think we'll write like tips related to some of these posts in the coming weeks, so that you'll be able to read that there. I think we also have like a satisfaction survey that I'm gonna post out. So just like, I'm interested to hear like if you guys enjoyed this, or like what you think we could do better, or what you're more interested in hearing in the future. So definitely, our contact info is there on the screen.
I'm gonna put a Q&A in my Instagram stories now, and we can answer questions on video for the next hour or so. So if you want to, any questions we didn't get to, if you want to pop them on there, we will answer them either privately or in a video or however you want. Yeah, and then did you send you're gonna send it?
Yeah, I'll put that up there.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Emily and Dr. Gershon. This has been fantastic. Thanks for, also sticking around on Instagram for the next hour and helping everybody out with a couple more of their questions. I think this has been fantastic and so great to see some of your tips and really thinking through how to structure your personal statement and how to include different examples and real action-oriented specific examples. And the samples we looked at were so fascinating to see an example that needed some work and a really great example as well. So thank you both for your time. And on behalf of everyone at the college, thank you. A shout out to Brenda. Thank you for organizing this event tonight, Brenda, my colleague. Many of you probably already know her. And just thanks to everybody for joining us. Please stay in touch as students and as young alumni. Keep hearing of different virtual events that we're doing this fall, and stay in touch with us and with updating your contact information. And hopefully one day, maybe you'll be providing a presentation like this for us, or you can join our mentorship program and you can come and talk to students and younger alumni about your experiences. So thank you, everybody, and good luck with the fall. And we hope to talk to you all soon.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.